And Eric.
Well, thanks, Jennifer, and apologies again for the delay. What I'd like to do today is take the time to bring you in, along with my colleague Eric, to the messaging and communication strategy that we're rolling out in North Carolina, but also in the other states supported by this Carter Center project. We want to show you the research we've been doing to really drill into who we should be engaging in your state and what we should be saying to them. And all of this is to lead up to asking all of you to join us in that messaging effort, especially through outreach on social media. So we're gonna try to speed this up a little bit as we have started 20 minutes late. I'm gonna share some slides, in which case I need to be allowed to do that, Dana. In a minute here, I will share some slides. And I'm going to basically walk you through the research we've been doing on audiences in your state and others. So can everybody see what I've got here? Okay, so as I alluded to, we've set up these networks, across 6 states. Jennifer and Bob in particular are doing an enormous amount of work educating North Carolinians about elections. But we've also been running regular surveys of public opinion using samples that are big enough to capture data specific to our target states, including North Carolina. We ran another one of these also, sorry, before we get surveys, qualitative data gathering. Some of you may have participated in a workshop we held back in the spring with a bunch of experts in North Carolina, where we asked folks about these key questions. What should we be saying and who should we be talking to? And out of those discussions, there was an interest in possibly reaching 2 different audience profiles. One are people like all of you on this call. For shorthand, we call these folks more engaged citizens. These are folks who vote every 2 years, read newspapers, more likely to be civically involved. And there was also interest in reaching less politically active Americans, people who vote less regularly, and maybe less trusting in the system. We also, as I mentioned, ran another survey of public opinion. That data, among other things, reinforced earlier findings that Americans across the board strongly reject political violence. That held true in North Carolina as well. But the piece I really want to focus on is working with our communications partner, GMB, who you'll hear from in a minute. They use these sort of giant data sets of internet search history data and voter file data to build audience profiles for these 2 different target groups, the sort of engaged and less engaged citizens in the state. This is some of the data that they delivered on that engaged North Carolina audience. And I really want to draw your attention to social media use, that those engaged voters, which may be everybody on this call, use Nextdoor. They're more likely to use Facebook. They are not on TikTok. Also note local newspapers read. They read their local paper. They also read the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post, right? Keep that in mind as you look at this profile for that less engaged audience in North Carolina. These folks don't read newspapers, and they're on Instagram, not Nextdoor. Okay, so this data informed this strategy. Essentially, we understand our target audiences in the state as being a set of sort of concentric circles. The members of the North Carolina Network for Fair, Safe, and Secure Elections and others on this call, you are certainly in our core engaged audience. What this research taught us was that we need to recruit more people in that core engaged audience, but also people with a different media diet, people who may be less trusting, less likely to vote, if we want to reach a broader audience in the state. Zooming in, there's a few pieces to this sort of expanding puzzle, but basically the idea is we get in the media, we expand our Facebook following, put out newsletters, get lots of earned media, which the North Carolina team has been doing in spades. and then recruit new kinds of messengers who can reach different target audiences. We've got certain key messages that we want interspersed through all of this, especially emphasizing the importance of peaceful disagreement in our political system. And we've been implementing this strategy, right? If I said the first thing was to establish your media footprint, well, you know, the North Carolina Network for Fair, Safe, and Secure Elections has been doing that since 2022, at least, if not before, right? This is just some of the media coverage garnered recently by the work of the Election Commission in the state. Each of these Carter Center supported networks has its own logo, brand, and website. This is a screenshot from the Michigan Network website. All of these state networks are putting out newsletters. This is a screenshot from our Wisconsin Network's newsletter. And we have developed the ability in the last few months to respond quickly to relevant events. So this is a Facebook post that we put out in Florida through the Florida Network just a couple hours after the shooting where former President Trump was injured in July. And we are so far able to get into the conversation in real time in earned media. So this is one of our network leads down in Southern Arizona, a former Congressman Barber, speaking to local news in the aftermath of the July assassination attempt. Another example of that real-time news engagement, this is a quote from the State House Minority Leader in the Georgia State House, Dr. James Beverly. He's a member of our Georgia network. He's close with one of our leads down in Georgia who reached out to Dr. Beverly and got him to put this quote in local media as a Democrat condemning the shooting in Pennsylvania. So my colleague Eric's going to say more about what's coming next, but for us, the reason we're having this call is in the hope that you can help us recruit more messengers and push out this messaging. We've started weekly emails where we're asking folks to just click 4 links and repost the content that's being shared on the North Carolina Network Facebook page. And then the last big piece of this that we're trying to get in place before the November election is this rapid response planning session that will happen for network members and other interested parties on October 22nd at 9 a.m. This is where we will really get into brass tacks about who does what in the event of crises surrounding the election. But let me stop there and I'll turn it over to my colleague, Eric.
Perfect. Thanks, Nathan. Just confirming, can I get 1 thumbs up that people can hear me before I go straight? Great. I'm going to start sharing my deck because I know, like you said, we are a little bit pressed for time. So thumbs up that you can see a deck. And we're moving. Great. Okay. Well, as Nathan was alluding to, obviously this research kind of then informs the strategy that we want to kind of do here the next one. As you all have probably seen, and if not, then just wait. I'm sure they're coming. Jennifer and Bob have been crisscrossing the state and going all over to talk to different audiences across the state to make sure they hear about how the election system works, how it is safe, how it is secure, and what people can do to ensure that their vote is counted properly and how they can learn in that process. So that's just part of this, right? The other part is getting that story out of those rooms and to the people that might, not be engaged and might not come to a town hall to learn about elections. So I'm going to skip through a couple of these parts because they're kind of broader pieces and I want to make sure we leave time for questions and answers. But what we started to do once we had kind of worked through with Nathan on what those audiences look like, we started to think through, okay, well, how does that mean, like in the landscape that we are in, how are we actually going to reach those audiences with the messages we need? What are the strategies we have to put in place? What planning can we do? And then what is the type of content and outreach that we can do to actually get them to move from that little blue oval that Nathan showed you, the engaged, get those engaged people to the people that need to hear it. And also, and this is something specifically that Jennifer and Bob in the North Carolina, you all have been doing more than most of the other states, is also really kind of being on the offense for people that might really be kind of openly hostile to the idea that elections are safe and secure, and really trying to engage where people might have an oppositional view to some of the stuff that we're putting out there. So I'm going to go a little fast in some of these. Please feel free to use the chat to put in questions as you go, because if I don't want to lose those questions if they come up, but I want to make sure we leave the time for the discussion too. So first thing we kind of put through is we're thinking through the landscape overview here. We always think about that from a perspective of like, what are the goals that we're trying to accomplish? So part of that already comes, this is the more broad center of what the Carter Center is trying to accomplish here, along with the work of specifically of the North Carolina team. So, working with individual and community partners to change norms around anti-democratic tendencies of violent behavior. We want to change the mindset of people that are starting to get stuck in those information environments. That also means empowering communities, people, structures to actually be able to push back on these things and increase trust in elections. And Nathan kind of alluded to this as well. There's a viewpoint that the Carter Center has seen in a lot of places, that there's a feedback loop between when people don't trust elections, they're more likely to act out in other ways because they don't know how to politically engage in a way that's effective or peaceful. So they think about other ways, which could be violent. So it's part and parcel to be able to prevent violence, to also actually be able to talk about how you should trust that elections are a way to be able to continue to improve your community and society. So what does that mean for North Carolina? Some of the stuff that they've already been doing, and you all are here as part of it, being connected to the political actors, community members, and officials that will be able to message around these people, being connected to the messengers and audience that we actually need to reach. So some of those disengaged people that Nathan was talking about that are not reading local news or are not engaged in the social networks we're engaged in. So how do we reach those people? Regular internal, external communications, the stuff to be prepared as a system, and then being prepared to respond to crisis communication situations, which, as Nathan mentioned, there's another session coming up next month that we're going to be going more deeply into that. So strategically, what does that mean and what do we know now? Obviously, we are like in the general election, right? Which kind of got a little earlier and more exciting this year because things changed up at the last minute in a lot of ways. But that doesn't necessarily mean that disengaged voters suddenly started caring about an election just because a bunch of stuff happened for about a topic they don't normally care about. We've seen, and GMB, the communications firm I work with, and the clients that we work with, we've seen historic levels of people tuning out political news. And when I say that, I don't mean that it's not that they are just like paying attention to it less. It means that they're actually going to outlets where they just don't get engaged with political news. Remember at a time when more people were listening to local radio, watching local news, reading a local newspaper, all of the different kind of varieties of news, whether it was general, sports, culture, arts, all of that stuff was in one place. You kind of sift through to find the news and stories you wanted to listen to. Now folks can just kind of only pay attention to the vertical they care about. If they want sports news about specific teams, about specific sports, they can just go there. They don't have to engage with the front page that might be about political or policy news. So that means we have to think about how to get that news through other channels if they're completely avoiding them in the first place. If they're not watching local news, how are they going to hear about the local voices that actually can be the most trusted messengers on elections? So that is what we're kind of thinking about here. Obviously, there's going to be more discussions of political violence, whether that's in election forums. We had the campus protest discussions back in the spring. There's also that there are more and more organizations this year that are kind of grassroots and grass tops organizations that are focused on elections, which means there's a more busy environment to have to discuss these things, and where we're having to compete with other people who might not share our same thoughts and values on some of these things. So how do we actually get the chance of having these conversations and also being able to compete against mis and disinformation in the space, which has ballooned since really 2016 and 2018. So I'm not going to go through all these piece by piece because this is kind of like long-term strategy pieces. What you should know is that this work we see it as going beyond November, right? Because we're going to be talking about trying to increase trust in elections and increasing the importance of peaceful political engagement. That doesn't end in November. And honestly, it's probably like we're kind of in the short term here of getting to November, that we're not going to necessarily dramatically change all of the things in the next 5 weeks, right? So this is a longer term project than just, and we hope you stay engaged beyond that. What we can do in the meantime is really be thinking about how to reach into these disengaged audiences and get them engaged and get them informed about what the process that's about to unfold is, and how they can trust that if they do decide to vote and do decide to engage, that their vote matters, that it's safe, secure, and it will count. So that means increasing reach of the events and webinars that Jen and Bob have been doing, also looking to deploy these digital and earn tactics. So some of the social we'll be talking about with you today, and all of the interviews that people are doing. Recruiting messengers, like you all, hopefully, that can be helpful messengers to reach out to the communities and audiences that we might not immediately have access to now. Continuing to be a bipartisan resource. This is something that we talk about a lot because there's a level of communication that shifts from the partisan campaign coverage as soon as election day is over. Like they're still going to go, ask, a campaign, hey, how do you think you're doing? Do you think you won it today? But more and more, you're going to start, media will shift to the nonpartisan or non-aligned sources for information because they want the people that are going to be unbiased in those conversations. So that's going to be a really important time for folks like you all to be able to speak with a voice that talks more about the importance and safety of the election, not just who won or who lost. And then beyond that, developing some of these tools and systems, which has already been in progress and is just going to continue as we sharpen them and hopefully get them ready for what will be contentious next few weeks, but then hopefully is contentious but not violent period following election day, which is what we're all working towards here. So with that in mind, what does that mean for our next steps? Obviously, have moved stuff going all across the markets. I know the team's going to be headed down to the southeast corner of the state, Lumberton and Southport. They got a lot going on even just in the next week or so. Hope that does not get too rainy for you. My family down in Florida is watching the storm. I'm sure you all as well. But that also on top of that, making sure that the message gets out of these events. So as we have messengers and spokespeople that elections experts and cybersecurity experts and lawyers that speak at these events, making sure they're recruited and able to talk to people afterwards and say, yeah, this is what we know and this is how it is. And if there's a problem that arises in November, we can say, I know exactly who to call in Asheville and say, this is the person you should talk to in the market there because they can tell you why this election is safe and secure and what they're seeing on the ground. So that's the effort that's going on now with these events and webinars and movements. Also doing our earned media as we go. There's been a lot of interviews happening, and that's obviously looking for opportunities to not just do the press that we see, but also there's a lot of radio that's been going on, print and TV, as much as more of that, and podcasts like we can keep doing. Adds legitimacy to the organization. In North Carolina, obviously, you all benefit from having some really good comprehensive research and reporting done by the commission. So that's another thing that we get to be able to talk about that continues that trend of you being an expert in this space. But then there's also the reactive pieces. We saw, Nathan pointed out the messaging that went out after the first assassination attempt of this political cycle, that there are those opportunities for letters to the editor, talking points, statements as potential things arise, looking for opportunities to be a voice that brings down the rhetoric and de-escalates things in a period that we don't want to get hotter than it has to be because we already know it's going to be fairly hot and contentious. But then we also just want to know what are additional tools that we should be thinking about. If that's media trainings on key messages, if that's elevator pitches for you when you go into a space that you want to talk about this, but isn't maybe necessarily an online space. Maybe that's a church, maybe that's a community meeting, maybe that's a neighborhood association, whatever that is that you find yourself in a space that you think you could be engaging audiences that don't normally hear about these messages and should be hearing about them. What can we provide you to help with that? Because we're here to help and we want to make sure that you have the tools to communicate effectively, whether it's online, offline, with media, wherever it is. So I'm gonna, we kind of already talked through the disengage. I'm not going to dwell on this right now. We're going to leave that to the group conversation and just pause a little bit on social content. So part of the work we've been doing too is working with each of the states to develop materials that we can kind of talk with a broad, positive, nonpartisan basis to increase trust in elections, but also to just generally decrease fear of fellow Americans. And this is something that comes up a lot in a lot of research about violence, around democracies, about and low and middle income countries, but also in previously developed countries, is that there are greater risks of violence when people don't see each other as human beings, and when we are able to dehumanize each other and desensitize. So the more we fear each other, the more likely or prone we are to potentially be able to do violence. And obviously, I'm not talking about anybody on this call, but I am talking about our disengaged audience who maybe feels voting doesn't really have an impact anymore, or I don't really care whether the outcome is safe or not because it's not the way I wanted it to be. Those are folks that need to hear that the people that voted for the other side aren't going to hurt them. They shouldn't fear them. This is something that we still need to continue to try to settle our disagreements at the ballot box and politically. And that's the kind of messaging that we're trying to make sure is coming out and that we can help create that environment for people in online spaces that they might not be getting information on, because they don't necessarily get it from TV if they're not watching local TV, right? So like, what are those things that create common identity, create common understanding, so that we can have more cooperation and less fear in these ways? So that's something that, and to Nathan's point as well, be sending out regularly. If you'd like to be an ambassador, which I hope you all would, we think you would, with this information, have what you need to be able to be an ambassador. There's gonna be regular emails that shares content that you could easily just say, I want to share that on my Facebook. Click on the link and it'll automatically generally populate, but it'll also come with whatever tools you might need that you want to be able to share this messaging, so that we can, between now and election day, try to keep and ratchet the tension down and provide good information, but also be able to, as much as possible when election day is over, create that level of trust and understanding that people know that the outcome was fair and that their vote was secure, and that we move into a figure out the next step of whatever our community or country decides based on that outcome. So I'm going to stop there and stop sharing, because that was very quick, and I know that we have that we also wanted to make sure we hear from you all on this. And I don't know if anybody had to use the chat. No, we don't have any questions there, so I will pause there and throw it back to the team.
I want to say a couple things.
Yeah.
Thank you, Eric. Wow, that was really fast talking. We are hoping, and I know some of the folks on the call have are connected through different organizations. Some of you folks have been on our election commission. Some of you are working with social justice organizations. We are hoping that we can build a group of folks who are willing to do messaging around elections, but also around depolarization. I know that, many folks are concerned about how we are othering people in our communities, and we think that if you didn't vote like I did, you must be evil, which is not a very good way to build community. We think that with more and more people who understand their voice and their Facebook account and their, network of their own can benefit from sharing some of the messaging that the Carter Center and GMB are producing for us here in North Carolina, that is going to help us not just November the 5th through January the 20th, but also after that. And so really that's why we put together this, short training. We're going to have another one that's going to be even more focused on peacemaking and peacekeeping during elections and after, because we know that the result's not final on November the 6th. That's been a big message that Bob and I have been getting out across the state. And media is the people we've talked to individually, reporters are getting that. But we know it's just so hard. The reason that Eric and Nathan are so important is that messaging is not, it's not easy. It's not easy because not everybody's reading the same stuff and listening to the same stuff, and, even on the same platforms. So anyway, I just wanted to give that kind of bigger picture to a lot of folks, and we really appreciate you being here. And now you can continue with the breakout rooms and whatever else you guys had planned.
Well, I think we've got 15 minutes left. I think we can just stay in this group and take any reflections on this, questions, comments. I've got further thoughts myself, but I would welcome any feedback from this group.
Yeah, Nathan, let me chime in. We still have not figured out an effective way to capture and expand what we're hearing from the bipartisan members of the local boards of elections. I mean, consistently across the state, we've had Republicans and Democrats reinforce the message that we want to get out. But, we only get a small gathering at the town halls where these officials are appearing, and press coverage specifically on the events is hit or miss. I mean, sometimes we get a local reporter, and I really think so. The 2 points I would make is, if you want to reach let's just pick the more conservative element in the state, somehow using these Republican appointees to the boards of elections are really the most effective and well informed, because I mean, they're in the middle of the process. So that's been a sense of frustration that we just really haven't been able to amplify what we're hearing. And the second is, I think the big issues in North Carolina are going to be around the litigation. And so I would be curious in having, and I don't know, maybe Kevin Johnson's group is the one that's going to talk about this, but explaining to people post-election exactly what these lawsuits are. And I pulled a story just the other day. I mean, there have been 4 lawsuits filed against the State Board of Elections by the Republican Party in the last month here in North Carolina. And if you have a razor close margin and unresolved lawsuits challenging certain aspects to the election system, if I want to gum up the works, that's where I'm going to gum it up. And, unfortunately, you're going to need lawyers, and you're going to need neutral lawyers conveying the message. And that's something that I think we need to think about. So that's
Bob, I think you could be a neutral lawyer. You're
well,
unaffiliated.
I've played a Republican lawyer. I've played the Democrat lawyer. I can be, I can play whatever role they need me to play.
Well, let me pick up on that, Bob. I don't have an easy answer, but this conversation is definitely part of it. One of the things that data underscores, the presentation that I just shared, the data from GMB, is that there is a huge chunk of folks in North Carolina who are not watching TV news and they are not reading the newspaper. That is not a tool to reach them. And that's true in every state. Your state's not unique, right? So this is where using the North Carolina Network Facebook page, but getting specific people to reshare and repost key content is key. So I would humbly suggest for folks on this group, if you know the kinds of people, particularly in Republican circles, that could be those messengers, when we put a good story, when we get a nice, like, Charlotte Talks piece, and then Rachel posted on the North Carolina Network Facebook page, once it's there, you can call those folks and say, hey, like our network on Facebook, and then go repost that story that we just posted. Because that's how we get this information to an audience that otherwise we're never going to reach. And it can be done. I mean, it's a lot of legwork. It's a bit of a pain in the butt, but it is doable.
Yeah, can I ask a quick question? I don't do Facebook. Twitter is my one sin when it comes to social media, for better or worse. But then I see all of this. I mean, Jeff Jackson was saying that our candidate for attorney, or one of the candidates for attorney general, was talking about his TikTok videos and how, like, one of them, he had 4 million views, or maybe it was 40 million. I mean, it was some staggering number. And so I don't do TikTok. I don't do anything but my sort of limited social media deal. I don't know, from a communication standpoint, whether Facebook is touching the broader audience, or whether these other social media vehicles that I don't do, like TikTok, are where we need to try something. Anyway, that I just raised that as a question.
Maybe Eric could speak to that.
Yep. No, sure. I mean, like, so TikTok is one huge platform, and that's why, and it's the big piece that Nathan was kind of going through on where we see the audiences we're talking about. The audiences that we there's that third audience, Bob, that we had talked about way ago, which is like the unheard folks, the folks that don't even necessarily believe that democracy works at all, never believed it, and that are more likely to not necessarily be engaged in those pieces. They over-index heavily on TikTok. What we think is possible here, and what we want to try to reach, and not to say that we shouldn't be on TikTok, we could be. It just takes a lot of time to set up a following and set up a viewership and everything else. And some of the other piece too is that there's content that can be shared. Like, for example, if we're creating something for Facebook, that's a copy and some image that could be put on LinkedIn, that could be put on Twitter. Those are for, and you all have, and that's the best part of how we I kind of zoom through this part a little bit at the end. But the idea of being an ambassador or a messenger here isn't to say that you only have to post on Facebook because that's the only content that we're necessarily highlighting for you. That's to say that these are messages that can work on social platforms, and you should spread this far and wide to the audiences you have, because the people on this call represent a fraction that can then reach a multiple of this group, right? Each of you at least probably has tens, if not tens, then maybe hundreds of people that you can reach out to with just the channels you have alone, or that you can talk to just by going to the meetings you might go or the things you might be between now and election day. And then the few weeks after, if you are using these opportunities to use these messages, how many people do you think you could reach with some of this? That's why we look at it this way. It's what we would call a snowflake model. One person at the hub or a couple people at the hub that then breaks out, and each of you branch out into more people. So agreed. And if anybody on here wants to start making TikToks, we are happy to support you on how to do that. But we also know that the vast majority of the audience that we're looking for is more likely to over-index on places like Facebook. That is a good starting place, just based on what we've seen in North Carolina from the research we did.
My name is Shara Blackburn.
Sure.
I recently saw an article in WRAL News. Thought it was really well written, because it talked about the distrust Republicans, or their lack of confidence in the elections, and it went through why they should. And I thought at that point, I thought, this would be a perfect article for me to share a little bit of my experience as election official, and having been in both parties and now an independent, and invite people to come work at their county board of elections. But also I was thinking maybe that kind of message where it wasn't antagonistic, but I think a lot of what is going on here, people are just not educated as to the process. And I can tell you, I have worked with fine people on both sides of the aisle, that once they get educated about this, their antagonism is dialed back. I've even done this with observers that come in for the general elections. It's really interesting to watch how they come in and watch how they go out, because I use the opportunity to educate them so that they can see what's going on. And if we can do some of that across some of these social platforms, I think it'll be helpful. I mean, I could tell before January 6th, just on my Facebook account, what was going to happen. It was clear if you were paying attention to certain people. So these messages will get out to the people I think need to see it.
Yeah. No, great comment, Shara. And we have, the folks who are on this call, and we hope that we can share the recording with more folks. But I know that we've got someone who engages with all the campuses and the students, Leslie. We have Hillary Taylor, who's done a lot of informing people about redistricting. We have Nancy Carter, former city council member in Charlotte, now working in soil and water. So we've got, a lot of people here. We've got a realtor, we've got someone Latin American community. We've got a lot of people right here who have networks that, we may not have reached yet with one of our town halls or with our election commission. And, if you all are willing to, really commit to that 10 minutes a week to help share things. And, the other one, I'm on Threads as well. Nobody mentioned Threads. That got started when people didn't like Twitter. But, I will be sharing on all the things that I can. And if young people, we actually in 2020, there was a group of people in Charlotte, high school folks, who made a vote video, which got shared by a couple thousand people. So, if you're in touch with young people who want to do a TikTok video, I think Rachel put in the chat, when Jeff Jackson does his, it takes him 10 hours. to edit that because he's very careful on the words he uses, et cetera. You probably don't have that kind of time. So let's, if we can share what the Carter Center and GM&B are gonna put out there for us, and please, expand the network. I think Astrid has her hands up.
And thank you, Jennifer. And, it's just wonderful to hear this because I think that we need to be prepared. I think that's the word for these elections, to be prepared for whatever, because what we're not thinking will happen. So what I am, as I'm listening to you and the speakers talking, I'm with the YMCA and I run government relations and advocacy. And we have a group called Braver Angels that is focused on talking about disagreement and depolarization, but they go around the state. They're engaged in with different states. I don't know if any of you is familiar with that group, but we just had a situation with swastikas at one of our YMCAs on the south side of Charlotte. And I just think that we need to start preparing perhaps with some groups that are prepared and have the competency to have these conversations across the state. And now, I mean, it's not like we're going to wait until something happens, but that we need to start having this as a natural conversation for us to start debriefing. As you're talking about the 10 minutes, I think that we might want to start doing once a week something with a group, that we start having this bipartisan conversation. For the Latino community, there is a civic participation committee that is Latinos, Republicans, or word Republicans and Democrats that are working out, getting out the vote for the community, and they are together. That would be a perfect group, for instance, because it's a bipartisan civic engagement group. But there are other groups, other intact groups that have both, beliefs. So I'm just saying that not just for us to talk to ourselves, but to start reaching out further and getting ready for how we're going to articulate this message in a competent way, because it's not going to be easy. And I'm digging my heels stronger now in my beliefs, and I'm an unaffiliated. I've been an independent all my life since I have been a naturalized citizen in the United States. But I'm digging my heels in my beliefs now, more so. And the other people, the other side, is digging their heels even deeper, right? So how are we going to find that common ground before the elections that we are going to accept and, move forward with whatever their results are? So I just wanted to let you know that that group exists, the Braver Angels, and I could reach them if you wanted to, because we have them all across the state.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Astrid. And we are in touch with Braver Angels, and there's a Charlotte meeting tonight at 7:30 I'm going to be part of.
Oh, great.
Are you going to be on there on that one as well?
No. I have another meeting.
Okay.
With that, hopefully the rain was.
Yeah, absolutely. They do great work. We have worked with them. We are aligned, and we probably don't coordinate as much as we could. But there are a lot of people who are, swim in the same direction. So it's really great.
Right.
Absolutely. So thank you. Thank you, Astrid. Somebody else had their hand up. Harry.
I think that the messaging isn't so hard to figure out. But can you hear me okay? There's something funky going on.
Go right ahead, Harry.
The message isn't so hard to figure out. The thing that's hard to figure out is, and that's what you're talking about, is how do you disperse it? And and I don't do much on Facebook. I have a Facebook account, and I think Flush Gerrymander has a Twitter account or something like that. But I don't do much on that stuff. And what my network consists of anymore is people that think just like I do, and that's kind of who I hang around with. And I avoid. I occasionally the Observer will print a letter that I send, but they're down to 1 day a week. I mean, it's just not it's like the wooden nickel anymore. So how do you disperse a message? When I do get letters printed, I get some really nasty letters back from people I'm a commercial real estate broker, but I don't practice much anymore. But guys that are colleagues of mine, and they're nasty, and you don't even know how to begin to respond to them. I think the best thing, my sense is the best thing to do is nothing. Just leave them be, because you're not gonna turn them. And I think about how long Rush Limbaugh came on the radio in around 1990 or 91 or 92. There's people who have spent, until he was gone, their whole life following along behind him. And yet, I don't know that those people are ever reachable. And so I don't know where how we disperse these messages in a large enough fashion to make people stop and listen. And I can't remember who said, I can't recall who said it, but people don't know about government. They don't know what it is. They don't know what democracy is, and they're not. I don't even think they understand what. I walk around and I think to myself, these people have no idea what could happen or what's going to happen this fall. They have no idea. And how do you reach them? And that's what this is about.
Yeah.
I'm going to give Eric the last word, because we have experts on the call to answer these hard questions.
And I'll say that is kind of the core of the problem here, right? Is that, like, how do you engage disengaged people? And that's kind of part of it. There's actually two parts here that I heard there, Harry, though, too, which is the people that are so vitriolic. Those are another form of engaged people. They're engaged and they're yelling and they're doing that. And you're not, like, that's where you'll notice when we talked about like who we're trying to reach. I didn't necessarily say that we're going to try to reach out there and go fight these vitriolic people, because you're not going to change their minds. But they're also trying to reach the same people we're trying to reach. And if we just let them spew stuff, then the people that are disengaged are only hearing from them, and they're not hearing from us. And that's the biggest thing that we see when we hear about people who are concerned, to the earlier point about people just don't understand the process. If somebody is told, well, they're shredding ballots down there in Wake County, how is somebody supposed to know? If they don't know the process, how are they supposed to know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, or whether it could actually happen, or whether it's real? They just might believe it because they don't have the base information of how an election is administered to say that's not right. But if we give them just enough information or enough trust in the people, for example, they believe that they knew that election administrators are made up of their neighbors and people in their local community, that it's run by the state, not by the federal government, that there's a transparent process to see how the election is conducted and track your ballot and see how it's counted. That's usually enough information for people that just don't have one to start to be able to inoculate them and reject the crazier conspiracy theory stuff. And so part of it is just like, even if all we agree with, if we at least are encouraging people to push it out to their people, and when they hear this stuff, say, actually, that's not how this works, or where did you hear that? That helps us at least try to create better information environments for the people that aren't getting none of this and never follow this process because they just don't know. To your point, they don't know what this is like and they don't follow it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there are some that we're not going to reach, but there are a lot of people who are just confused, are hearing different things and are trying to figure it out. A lot of people are new voters. There are lots of new registrations I keep hearing on the news. A lot of folks have moved here from other states and need to know things. So there are people we can reach. I'm sorry, Nathan, I think I cut you off.
No, we're over time. I didn't want to take any more of anyone's time. And again, huge apologies for starting late and dragging you to another Zoom link. But you got a sense of what we're trying to do. I will say, as much as our resources in this regard are pretty modest, we don't have the budget that the Trump or the Harris campaign has. we are pushing something that is different, right? We're not asking anybody to vote for a particular candidate. We're trying to lift up values that all the data suggests are still commonly held by most Americans. That gives us an advantage, right? And if you can help us with that, I think it'll help North Carolina and our country.
Absolutely. And if folks can stay on a few more minutes, I know we started late and it's supposed to be an hour and yeah. I'd love to, hear any other comments. I know that there are some folks who've been working on bridging the gap, trying to bring people together. One of the, a couple of the folks that, or quite a few of the folks who went to Belfast with me, are very conservative pastors. And, they are reachable and have been part of this community of sharing a message of peace and process and, letting elections work in peace. So, and Nancy, yes, Legal and Voters is also doing a lot of outreach. They're a partner of ours as well in a lot of the outreach we're doing. Absolutely. Good stuff. Any other comments?
Real quick, we should be making connection with New North Carolina Project and New Rural Project as well. And they're out every day banging, and what is it? Down Home.
Down Home NC.
I know. Yeah, those organizations should be in this loop because they're out banging on doors every day, gaining trust. And they're the same, I presume, is that they're in communities. And so they see the same people all the time. So that's a place to get messages out. And it I'll just stop there. I think that's just something to add. So
no, thanks, Harry. Absolutely. They are representatives from all those organizations you named are on our email list. And of course, people are besieged by emails at this time of year. So that's the other challenge.
Jennifer, are you going to have another town hall meeting where we can bring a broader audience? Because I would tell you what is happening here right now is exactly what happened in my country of origin, Venezuela. The deterioration of every possible civil rights and steps until this dictatorship. It's been there 24 years. So once once he gets in power, the opposition won the election 70%, as we all know, and they came out the next day and said, no, we won, period. So my point is, like, if the more times that you can have this town hall to talk about, what our democracy is here and how it works and how it's protected and how we need to preserve it, because many of us from other countries have seen how it eroded and how we got to this point, and we're right there. So I'm just wondering, we could invite so many people that are naturalized citizens, that are United States born, that can understand at a different level this conversation. It's not just about voting. It's beyond that. It's existential right now. It is preserving our democracy that is the best in the world. And, we can lose it in a month. So
we need to get you on a video.
Oh.
share your comments.
Well, as long as it's bipartisan, because
Right.
with the why, I have to stay. I'm very clear where I am, but I have to talk a certain. But it has to be. I think this touches all of us,
Yep.
Everybody, no matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat.
Right.
This democracy is at risk right now, and we have seen it in other places. So I'll be happy to do it. And I have my fellow other Latina, Liliana Wendorf, there too. So our Queen's professor. So she's
Wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah, every town hall we've done has had at least one Republican, at least one Democrat, by design, and a lot of unaffiliated as well. But we absolutely are bipartisan and cross partisan, and the message needs to reach everybody. So Absolutely.
So just let us know when the next town hall meeting is so we can start promoting it. If you have one here in Charlotte.
Okay, well, we've had one, but I think we need to have another one that you can bring a different audience to, so we'll talk.
Well, the virtual
left.
one is October 15th.
That's true. That's true. October the 15th at 7
Oh.
p.m.
Okay.
Yep, we'll have a virtual town hall on Zoom, and we are getting the speakers lined up for that. We have the state risk officer, Tori Crass is going to be on that. He's the cyber expert for the whole state. So we're going to have a really interesting panel, and we'll get information out to everyone about that as well.
Awesome. Can you send us the invitation? Is it ready?
Yes. Well, Aaron, who's also on the call, is working on the flyer and through the Reimagining America project, who helped us do this 2 years ago as well. So we will absolutely get that to you. Astrid, you can share it.
Awesome. Great. Thank you.
And we'll record it as well. Thank you all so much for your time. I know everybody here is doing tremendous work in our community, and there are a lot of organizations that are working on the same theme of supporting democracy, supporting the peaceful transfer of power, and supporting good information, not mis and disinformation. So keep in touch. We will be sending some social media posts to you. We'll be sending more information. We'll send you information on the virtual town hall. And anything else, Bob, Nathan, or Eric?
Please reshare.
Okay.